Okay, hello and welcome. This is my first video on how to throw on the wheel. So today we're going to start with the most basic process, and it's the most important process. It's called centering. So we're going to be centering a 1 pound, 3 pound, and 5 pound ball of clay, roughly. And the process is kind of the same for all of them, but there's different ways you can kind of go about this. So we're going to go one by one. So you need to start out with nicely wedged clay. This can come right out of the pug mill, or you can wedge on the table, which is what I've done here. You want to make sure it's nice and soft. You don't want anything too hard, something that's workable. And then once you have it in that shape, I like to go ahead and pat it into a kind of ball, just so it's making your life easy on you when you're starting to center this stuff. You don't want it to be kind of off-shaping, because then you're really having to work the clay in. So the more round you can make it when you start off, the better off you're going to be. Okay? So we have our wheel here. We have our pedal set up. When it comes to speed, I kind of like to center pretty quickly, pretty fast. You don't want to go really slow, but I don't know if full speed is necessary. I'm going to be throwing on bats, so I can take these off and change them out as I need them. So you want to make sure your bat is nice and clean and hopefully dry, which this one sort of is. I'm just going to dry this off. Okay, when it comes to putting your clay onto the wheel, you don't want to just set it on there and let it sit, because it doesn't really have a good grip on it. So it's good to give it a little forceful throw on the wheel. You don't want to slam it down, and you want to try to get it as close to center as possible. If you throw it down over here, obviously it's going to spin around like that. So you want to try to get it as close to the middle as possible. So this just kind of comes with practice, but just kind of take it there and throw it in the middle. And if you need to kind of readjust it and kind of pull it towards the middle like that, that's fine. But just so it gets close, you don't want to have to put all your muscle strength into this first part. So you can see here, I've got a little, when I first started, you can see there's a little wobble to it. You put my finger up against it, my finger's moving all over the place. So our goal here is to get this clay to stop moving. I'm going to put it right in the middle of the wheel here. So the best way to go about doing this is to push against the clay until you feel pressure, and then just try to hold your hands as still as possible and let the clay form to the shape of your hand. Okay? It's really not a lot of pushing all the way through. It's just push until you feel pressure, and then stop, and then really tighten your hands up to try to get them to hold really still. Okay? Obviously, the clay is really dry right now. My hands are really dry right now, you can see. So you're going to need some lubrication. In this case, we're going to use a lot of water to do this. The way you should be sitting, I like to get really up close against the wheel with my legs almost straddling the sides like this. I like to put my elbows and arms down on my legs here, so they have a nice steady base, so that I'm squeezing my legs against the wheel. I'm squeezing my arms against my legs so that I have a nice round base. If I just put my hands on here, the clay can push my hands around. Even 1 pound of clay can push my hands around. It's really hard for me to squeeze that without some extra support. So I'm going to use my arms, my legs, my hips, my whole body when I lean into this, so I can push this clay around pretty easily. Okay? So we need to get our hands nice and wet for this process. We need to get the clay nice and wet. So some water on there. You can see now that my hands will easily slide over that clay, nice and gooey already. All right, so hand position. I'm right-handed, but I don't, everyone has their own kind of way of doing this, but what I like to do is I like to put my right hand flat against the wheel here like this, and then I push the palm of my hand, the heel of my hand right here, into the clay. This is the part right here that touches the clay for me to help center, and it touches it on the side. So when I press this into the wheel, because I know the wheel is steady right here, once I press my hand against the wheel like this, I can push my palm against the clay here like that, and that's what's going to press the clay sideways. Okay? Once again, I don't want to press and really push it across the wheel, because I'm just going to rip it right off the wheel. I really want to press it until I feel pressure, and then I want to stop, because then that clay has to form against the side of my hand. If my hand is still, the clay will be still. Now with the opposite hand, this is kind of the over-the-top one. So with this one, I'm almost kind of making like a cup with my hand like this, and really kind of cupping the top on this side. So it's helping reinforce the sidewall here, but I'm also using this part of my hand here to kind of slowly press down, because I want to get some sideways pressure, and I also want to get some down pressure. It helps the clay stick to the wheel, but it also helps that movement from side to side, so we get some wobbling on there. So really it's a two-hand maneuver, and it's not just hands. Once again, it's really hard to center with your elbows up like this. You really want to get your elbows down onto your legs. I even prefer to even put this elbow into my hip. So when I press against this, I'm not really pressing with my arm. I'm really just leaning in with my hip like this. And if I lean in, my whole arm moves in, and it just holds right there. And there's nowhere for that to go. You can press as hard as you can against my hand here, but if it's dug in my hip, that's not going anywhere. Okay? Once again, the top hand is just going to go on top and kind of gently press down. So what I'm going to do here is get my hands nice and wet. Clay nice and wet too. This hand on the side, tucked into my hip. And I like to wrap my fingers around here. I'll try to keep my hands open so you can see the clay, but I really don't wrap my fingers around so I can get a nice, I'll try to keep my hands touching like that. But for this, I'll just try to keep my hand open like this so you can see. Pressing against the side there, you can see my hand stop moving. I'm just really just kind of press until my hand stops moving just with this arm here, all right? And then easy off. Whenever you go on the clay or off the clay, it's really important to go easy on and easy off. If you have it right here and you just try to like rip off like that, you can see I've created a little wobble. So whenever you come off the clay, it's really like a deep breath. You let off, and there it is right there, okay? So we're better this time, but you can still see I've got a lot of movement here and a lot of movement here. I really didn't use my left hand at all in this part. All I really did was just kind of press in. You can see where the clay there has really scraped against my hand. That's the only real part that I put some pressure against, is the heel of my hand in there. It's the part that's really centering the side of that clay, okay? This time I'm going to involve my left hand, and this time I'm going to come on the side here, helping to support my right hand, but mainly I'm going to come over the top of my thumb and start pressing the top of that clay ever so slightly down, trying to hold that as steady as I possibly can too, because I want to get the side and the top centered at the same time. So coming in again, hands nice and wet, clay nice and wet, coming here with this hand, pressing in, and once again I'm pressing really hard down on the wheel here like this so that I can try to get the bottom and the top of the clay when I press into this. So pressing in here, and over the top I'm going to press down just a little bit, the heel of my hand, and then easy off. You can see here our clay is starting to get pretty centered here. Once again, there's where the clay is touching on that hand, under here, there's where the clay is touching on the top. So I'm pressing down here on the top like that. You can see it's right on the heel of my hand there, right where that thumb muscle is there. So just kind of curving that over so that this part is really running along the top edge right here. So I'm kind of curving that over so that this part runs along the top. So it's really just two parts of my hand. I like to wrap my hands around it, but this is really the only parts that you need for centering right there, okay? So we're really close on this piece of clay here. You can see the bottom still wobbly. The top here is pretty close. Top there is pretty close. When you kind of see it not moving at all, then you know you got it. So sometimes it's really hard, especially with a small piece of clay like this, to get that bottom in here because my hand doesn't want to push in. I've got this fleshy part of my hand which won't get serious pressure on the bottom there. So you can do a couple things with this bottom part. You can just take your finger and press that clay at the bottom back into the hump there, or you can actually scrape that clay off. You know, it doesn't really matter as long as you're trying to just get some pressure on the bottom there to get that clay back in, because that's usable clay. We want to use all the clay we put on here. Alright, so one last push on this and I'll have the 1 pounder done. Come in here, press against the side, come over the top, press on the top. I'm really pressing with my hips, my arms, everything's steady. Once I feel my hands really stop moving, I'm going to let off, nice and easy. Come back in here, press this in. That's pretty good. We have a nice kind of even shape here, not a lot of movement, a little bit on the bottom. Leaning in with my elbows, my arms, my hips. That's a pretty centered piece of clay right there. Okay? Not too bad. 1 pounders. 1 pound's pretty easy to do. It just takes a little practice. Once you start getting 1 pounders down pretty quickly, pretty consistently, you can move on to more difficult stuff like the 3 pounder, which we're going to try next. So there's 1 pound pretty centered there.